All right, let's dive into the fascinating world of corporate restructuring. You know, I've always thought of companies as these massive, living organisms. And just like any organism, to survive out there in the wild world of business, they have to adapt, they have to evolve, and sometimes they have to completely change their shape. That, right there, is what restructuring is all about.
I mean, you see it in the headlines all the time, don't you? Two huge rivals suddenly become one. Or some giant conglomerate decides to just break itself into tiny little pieces. It can look pretty chaotic from the outside, but trust me, there's a real strategy behind it all. A logic that's driving these massive corporate shifts. So, let's get into it.
So how do they actually pull this off? Well, it's not random. There's a whole playbook, a set of core moves any company can make when it's time to grow, or shrink, or just, get healthy again.
And this right here, this is basically our map for this entire explainer. These notes from our source material lay out all the key terms we're going to explore: amalgamation, demerger, spinoff, and internal reconstruction. These are the big strategies we're going to unpack one by one.
This really gets to the heart of it. Restructuring isn't just about shuffling papers around. It's corporate evolution happening right before our eyes. It's how these massive business organisms adapt to new challenges, jump on new opportunities, and, at the end of the day, make sure they survive.
Let's start with maybe the most dramatic move in the whole playbook: joining forces. This is when companies decide they're way stronger together, a move that can totally reshape an entire industry.
Okay, so the fancy technical term for this, as we saw in our notes, is amalgamation. It's really just a broad term for when two or more companies blend together to become one single thing. Either one company kind of swallows the other whole, or sometimes a brand new company is born from the two old ones.
But here's the real question, isn't it? What's the vibe of this combination? Is it a friendly merger between equals, a true partnership, or is it more like a hostile takeover, where one company is clearly the buyer and the other one is, well, the one being bought?
And that difference is absolutely critical. A true merger is a total fusion. All the assets, all the debts, everything gets pulled together, and the old shareholders from both companies become shareholders in the new, combined one. A purchase, on the other hand, is a straight-up acquisition. One company buys the other, and the old shareholders are simply paid out.
And that brings us to this term, purchase consideration. It sounds super formal and complex, but honestly, it's just the price tag. It's what the acquiring company pays to buy the other company. And that payment could be cash, new shares in the bigger company, or sometimes a little bit of both.
Now here is where it gets really fascinating. What happens when a company pays more for another company than its physical stuff, its factories, its inventory, is actually worth? Well, that extra money they pay is called goodwill. It's the price you put on the fuzzy stuff, the brand's reputation, its loyal customers, maybe a secret formula. It's a massive bet on the future, but it's also a risky one. If that future doesn't pan out, that goodwill can turn into a huge loss on the books, which is a very public way of admitting you overpaid.
Okay, so we've seen how companies get bigger, but what happens when they decide to get smaller? It sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes the smartest move a company can make is to break itself apart, to get leaner, more focused, and a whole lot faster.
This whole process is called a demerger. So picture a massive company that does like a dozen different things. In a demerger, it takes one of those business units, carves it out, and transfers it into its own brand new separate company.
Our source notes give us a perfect, super simple example here. Let's say you've got company A and it has a steel business and a cement business. It decides to demerge. So it creates a brand new company, we'll call it Cement Limited, and sells its entire cement division to it. So now, instead of one big, sprawling company, you've got two super focused ones. But there's a really subtle but super important difference between a demerger and something called a spinoff. The key is to just follow the money. In a demerger, the original parent company gets the cash for selling its division. But in a spinoff, the shares in the new company go directly to the original shareholders. For them, it's kind of like getting a special dividend, but instead of cash, they get stock in a brand new company. It's a way to unlock that value and put it right in their pockets.
Okay, so our final strategy isn't about getting bigger or smaller, it's all about fixing things from the inside out. Think of it as the ultimate corporate makeover, also known as internal reconstruction.
So here's the before picture. You've got a company with a really messy balance sheet, just bogged down by years and years of old losses. Its whole structure might be super confusing, which makes it totally unattractive to new investors. Basically, it's just not healthy and it needs a reset.
And here is the after. The whole goal here is to just wipe the slate clean. By totally reorganizing its finances, the company can show the world a much healthier, more honest picture of where it stands, making it way more attractive for investment and future growth.
So how in the world do they do this? Well, they've got a few tools in their toolbox. They can do a capital reduction, which lets them lower the official value of their shares to cancel out those old losses. They can also reevaluate their assets to show what they're really worth today. And sometimes they'll consolidate shares, like turning 10 old shares into one new one, just to clean up a messy structure. It's all about building a more stable, honest financial foundation.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground, mergers, demergers, and makeovers, but let's just zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. Why does any of this actually matter? What's the end game? Well, it really just boils down to these three core strategies for survival and growth. Companies join forces to get bigger, grab market share, or even take out a competitor. They split up to unlock hidden value and get way more focused, and they fix from within to heal old wounds and get ready for a much healthier future.
So in the end, restructuring is so much more than just a bunch of accounting terms. It really is corporate evolution playing out in real time. It's how businesses transform themselves to survive in a world that is just constantly changing.
And that leaves us with one final thought. Think about a big company that you follow, maybe one whose stuff you use every single day. Based on everything we've talked about, do you think they're a candidate for a merger, a split, or maybe a quiet little makeover from the inside? The next time you see one of those headlines, you'll know exactly what's in their playbook.